A new leader for the best quote in the history of the podcast. This week on Stories Behind the Door, an incredible journey for the president of 10 Federal, Andrew Capranos. Hello and welcome to the Stories Behind the Door podcast. I'm your host, Thaddeus Campbell, Director of Business Development and Strategic Branding at S3 Partners. We're going to get right to it with Andrew Capranos in a second. Just wanted to give a shout out to my friends at Kiwi 2 Construction. They've been supporters of these conversations in the storage industry. I'm so excited. I'm actually excited next week to get to see Wayne Woolsey and his crew out in Colorado at Snowmass at the Executive Ski Summit. Say that twice. Big news for Kiwi Construction. They just were bought by Janus, kind of the continuing trend of consolidation in the self-storage industry. On that note, I'm going to come back to my guy, Andrew Capranos, president of 10 Federal. Andrew, thanks so much for coming and joining the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Very much looking forward to this one. Ever since I got to meet you about a month ago and got to talk shop a little bit, you guys kind of stand out in the industry. I always start the podcast with the same question. It's a pretty simple one. Storage, such a niche asset. I don't think anyone goes to get their MBA at LSU and sets their sights on ending up in the storage industry. How did Andrew Capranos find himself being in self-storage?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I love that question. And it's something that I think that there is like a resounding continuity between people in the industry that I don't think anyone really kind of grows up thinking that, I want to rent garage spaces when I grow up. But it's a fun industry, and it's something I'm really glad that I got into. Growing up and, just kind of my career and what I enjoy, I'm a problem solver. I'm an operations guy at heart. And I love seeing like complex problems and solving them. So, I started my career in operations. Actually I had an internship with Target, in the retail, sphere early on when I was in college, and kind of carried that through. They offered me a job, a year before I graduated. So I went on and, went through kind of the ranks there and really grew up there and learned a lot about operations. And what I found was that there's a lot that goes into running one of those big box retail kind of enterprises. If you think of one store at Target, you have 200-300 employees. It is a 24-hour operation and, brings in a lot of revenue. But at the end of the day, the margins are so slim. And so, me thinking back, all the effort that goes into your life, operating one of those stores and, running, one of those huge operations to squeeze by with some single digit margins really wasn't worth it. So, when I got a call from a recruiter, and they said, "Hey, we're in this self-storage thing." And I'm like, "Okay, what's this all about?" And they're like, "Yeah, we have these great, incredible margins. And hey, by the way, we run these stores with one or two people." I'm like, "Wait, one or two people?" And, I'm coming from a life where I had, 300-400 people, at a very large store, was, definitely something that was attractive to me. And then, that kind of carried on my career. I spent, almost a decade at Public Storage before coming over to 10 Federal to lead our operations in our company over here.
I'm fascinated to go down this road with you. For whatever reason, I've been in the storage industry now for 4 years plus, going on 5 years. I've never really gotten close to anyone that's been with Public Storage, which is really odd because I'm close to a lot of people, especially through the podcast. I'm going to try and make inroads in that. But I want to kind of pick your brain about that time at Public Storage and what it was. Obviously, they're the juggernaut in the self-storage space, massively bigger than anybody else in the industry. What was it like working there and getting exposed to their operating philosophies?
Yeah, I'll tell you, like, and I've said this, it's like getting a second MBA in self-storage. So, they've been in this game longer. Store count, obviously, Extra Space made some inroads there, but in terms of owned stores and, market cap and things like that, Public Storage is still the largest. They've done things right. They've learned a lot about how to run stores and how to do it very efficiently. And I think, they were it's something that attracted me there is they were a leader in that innovation space. So, they were one of the first people to come out with a app, to manage that customer experience, and they dove in and really tried to get a lot of results out of deploying that across their chain, and the access control and things like that. So they've added in a lot of technology pieces behind the scenes, one from a CX perspective, but also behind the scenes on how they operate their properties. And I was there for, like I said, I think it was about 8 years or so. So the company I started with was not the same company I left with. So it evolved, and I think that was probably one of the best experiences, seeing how a large enterprise like that can evolve with the times. Obviously I was there during COVID, where before I started, we didn't do any online rentals. Everything was paper, and we signed leases by hand and stuff like that. And then then we got to iPads, and then we got to online rentals. So it was nice seeing kind of that progression in the space as well.
I want to dive down this a little. I listened to the third quarter earnings call, and a fascinating statistic that they said where 85% of their customer interactions now are non-human, right? It's a chat bot, or it's some form of interaction that doesn't involve an actual person for them. That's fascinating to me. And to think that Public Storage, which a lot of times the juggernaut is the slowest to make the turn, nobody really mistakes self-storage for like an industry that's been a forefront of technology innovation necessarily. How did Public Storage manage to make that shift as quickly as they did?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes back to people, right? So they made some good hires. They had some great people that they brought on. The team, I have nothing but positive things to say about the folks over there. Um, but what was interesting on that call was another quote, and I listened to it too. Is Joe said, the days of needing a on-site property manager all day, every day are behind us.
100%.
And I thought that was a very powerful quote. And, there's a lot of people still holding on to that. And like with change, change is hard for a lot of people. We've done it this way for so long, and we want to keep doing it because we had some success and things like that. But, the way I look at it is, change is inevitable. And I mean, there's a few things that we live by here. One of the things is speed is life. And it's a famous tech quote, Bill Gates out there, is that self-storage is evolving, and the people who can move fast and adapt quickly and change, using AI, using automation, things like that, machine learning, they're going to be the ones that come out on the other side of this with success. There's a lot of like macro talk about like just workforce shortage as well. That's something that we really at 10 Federal, one of the ways we started our business. I'm happy to talk through that too. But
Yeah.
there in the next decade, there's a huge labor shortage that I don't think anyone is talking about enough. That there will be more jobs than people available to fill them. And if you don't figure out how to automate your business and get rid of like repetitive routine tasks that are labor intensive, then you're going to be very hard pressed to find people to operate in that business model. So I think that's very important as we look at the future of self storage, and some of the tasks that are heavy payroll dependent. And it's not about eliminating people or anything like that. I mean, all of our businesses are relying on people. It's just getting them to do better jobs and different jobs. So I think with being able to adapt and innovate and thrive, those are going to be the people who separate themselves from the competition.
I had a conversation earlier this week with Jacob Pandel, the founder of Notify. Their tech company do a wonderful job at what they do. But the reason I bring this up is what you just said. And Jacob's message to his employees all the time is like, hey, look, AI and machine learning are there to allow people to do what people do best, right? Not to replace people doing things that people are not necessarily best suited to do. And by the way, when he was saying this to me, I obviously knew I was going to speak to you later this week. And I was thinking about this from the perspective of my interview with you on the podcast, because 10 Federal is really known for being at the forefront of this innovation, right? From the time you guys really dove into the self-storage space in 2015, you've been known for pushing technology as a way to help maximize operations in the space. obviously you didn't join them then, you're more recent to the company, but talk to me a little bit about the philosophy of the company and how that's really coming to life as we get more and more technology to aid that process in 2025, 2020. I got to say 2026 now. We've turned a calendar year over.
You're right. I'm still getting used to that too. So, yeah, I mean, our firm was founded in 2010. We bought our first self storage property in 2015, and we ran it like a legacy model, right? So similar to how big REITs run their properties, and probably vast majority of folks out there are still running properties with a manager behind the counter. And at that point, 2015, we actually had installed a cloud-based camera system, and so that was pretty innovative at the time, where you could remote in and watch cameras. Now it's more mainstream, but at the time, it was very innovative and novel. And so what we did is we were able to, at our office, have those cameras up and then watch what was happening at the property, really to kind of study and understand the business. Our founders hadn't worked in storage before that. And what they found was, back then it was, a lot of the 8 hour day, 6 of the 8 hours were spent on their cell phone, playing Candy Crush or watching Netflix. I say keeping Netflix in business. So, that was where this idea came from is, what are we doing? I mean, these properties are efficient and they're cash flowing and everything like that, but how can we do it better? I mean, there's so many parallel industries out there that, you can go rent a hotel room across the world, without speaking to someone. And, every other industry has figured this out, right? Rental cars, airplanes, hotels, no one, you don't need to speak to anyone to do any of that stuff. So why is it? And if you were to rewind in 10 years and ask me like, what are, of all these different parallel industries, which one is not going to be automated? Like renting a garage space is very hard for me to say that would have been the one that's not automated. But that's what we ran into. So, when we went out and did this and started raising a fund and said, hey, we're going to do this different. We're going to, we're essentially a pioneer in the space. A lot of people like, hey, good luck with that. And we had to build out a lot of technologies ourselves because they didn't exist in the marketplace. So we had to build out a few things ourselves. DaVinci is one of them. We now sell to others. It's actually the most widely adopted access control device in the country. It's used out of, I think, one of every 5 locations. It's used in every public storage facility nationwide. But we didn't set out to do that. We just had to build technologies for ourselves, because we were running this automated. Now, what's great is that it's becoming more mainstream. So you have people like Notify, people like Rafa out there, like other people have come in and added technologies into this space that it's really, it's helping others that maybe don't have the resources or the desire to go out and build software and things like that to help support their properties, but they can still, realize the efficiencies of running an automated model.
I find this fascinating. It's a conversation I love to have. Jessie Lamb, who's now the VP of Operations and Self Storage for Notify, she was on the podcast when she was still at Strat Properties, a year and a half ago. I keep in touch with her a lot, and one of the things it talked about when she was still at Strat was this importance of the customer and focusing on the customer and making sure the customer experience is great. And I'm going to ask you this in a way of like, you don't necessarily need that manager paying Candy Crush on their phone in the lobby of they're not necessarily the best way anymore to make the customer experience great. How is 10 Federal kind of using technology and innovation to help maximize the customer experience, even as you, quite frankly, save operational costs by not necessarily having a full-time employee on site at every store?
Yeah. Well, what I'll say is automation doesn't work if you don't factor in the customer experience. So the customer at the end of the day is our boss, right? We rent space to the public, we rent space to customers, we charge for our service. We need to react to their needs. Now, what I'll say is that customers want outcomes. They don't want interactions. And I think the best tenant experience is the one that just works. Can't scale people. We talked a little bit about that earlier, but you can scale systems and technology and process, and that's where you can get consistency. So, I'll rewind it, or, you look at a large operator, 200, 300, 1,000 stores. That means you have 1,000 different people, at each one of your stores doing a process. Some people are on their phone, some people are playing Candy Crush, and some people are probably doing a great job and following the process and the systems that are put in place. But it's very hard to get a consistent experience and being able to control that customer experience if you're scaling it with human beings. Um, what I can say is that I can fully control the tenant experience when they come to my property, when they interact with my sales process and things like that, because I've fully automated that whole life cycle. We call it from cradle to grave, from the time the customer comes in to the time they're ready to end their tenancy. We've automated that entire workflow. So there's really no need for a customer to interact. We do have channels that they can interact with a person if they choose to, but I'll tell you, I mean, similar to PS, like, if you give customers a way to self-service, they will self-service. It's the same reason I go to the self-checkout line, even at a grocery store, when there's still a cashier available. Yeah, she's available if I want to go through the line, but 9 times out of 10, I'm going to ring it up myself and just go. And it's funny because going back and circling back to like my Target days, we were very guest focused. That was Target's big thing, and they said we will never do self checkout. Like that wasn't going to be a thing. Well, now you go to every Target and their self checkout. So it's a function of like adapting to customer expectations. Customers are expecting this frictionless, easy self-service environment. They don't want to get on the phone. They don't want to have to call and talk to you. If they want to pay their bill, it needs to be frictionless. If they have an issue, they need to be able to self-service it and without having to wait on hold and talk to someone. Let's be honest, we're in self-storage. One of the beautiful things about our business is it's so simple. We rent space and we collect money. That's essentially the two main things we do. And if there's an issue, it's normally one of 5 issues. So it's like, you can go down and whiteboard out how to self-service each one of these issues, and make it very simple, from a customer standpoint to be able to solve that.
Yeah. I'm interested to know, and you guys, and the way you've set this company up. How do you see technology innovating as we're going forward? Obviously, we've been able to implement a lot of this coming into 2026. What do you see happening as we move on? Is there room for more technology and more improvement in maximizing that customer experience, but still being able to, of course, we've seen increasing property taxes, we've seen increasing insurance costs, some of those net operating expenses that we can't really control as owners, they move. The thing we can control is how much money are we paying to staff in that store. What do you see coming, and what's next for the industry?
Yeah, I mean, we're in the midst of building a bunch of different things, and we're not definitely not letting grass grow under our feet when it comes to this. So, I think with the advent of AI out there, I think there's going to be a real place, and it more than just the surface level stuff. We talk about people making content with it, and that's all great, but what I think the real power of it's going to be is just compressing decision times. And we talk about speed is life. But there's massive amounts of customer data that we have, and specifically behavioral data, that humans just can't process, right? So we can't process it fast enough, but AI can do it. And it allows decisions to be made continuously rather than periodically. So, I think when we look at, what's next for the industry, I think, obviously the CX, customer experience, we're going to need to continue to iterate that, continue to make it frictionless, easy to rent, easy to pay, easy to, move out or, report an issue or whatever else they need to do. Then from a, revenue management side, you know, a lot of people who have been in this industry a while think of technology as an expense center. And it's really not. It's really how you're going to differentiate and be able to drive better margins by investing in technology to make your properties more efficient, be able to drive more revenue. Happy to chat more about that, but that's kind of my initial thoughts on this.
That answers my question very well. We could go on for hours and hours about where AI is going and what's going to happen with machine learning, but thank you for the answer. I want to go back to something you said earlier that absolutely struck me. I've never heard this said before. I'm going to give it, this is going to be Andrew Capranos in parentheses from now on in my life. but you said customers want outcomes, not interactions. Talk to me about how that concept kind of frames how you guys go about what you do. Because I've never heard that before. It was fascinating to me to hear it, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah, if you think about it, why are your customers coming to rent with you? Like, they're not coming, no one comes to self-storage because, hey, look, I just, got my Christmas bonus and I want to go out and like, shop around and window shop self-storage. It's because they have a need. We're a needs-based business. They're here, something happened in their life that caused a need for self-storage. Sometimes it's, some sad things, sometimes it's happy things, but at the end of the day, it's like you're a service that they need and they want to minimize that experience so that they can get on with their life. And that's the way I look at it is like we're a portion of their day and we want to make that a great experience. We want to make it frictionless. We want them to have a good experience, but that doesn't mean that they need to come in and have to speak to someone. They should be able to pull up to an office, scan a QR code, get to exactly what they need. And a lot of times people, one, they've never rented a storage unit before, so they don't know what the experience is supposed to be like. So if you look at like, mobile check-in, for instance, in the hotel industry, when that first came out, like, it was kind of novel and stuff, but now it's like, I did a check-in for my hotel tomorrow just on my phone. Like, and it's an expectation that it's just going to be there. So as technology continues to progress, like we'll be able to drive customers to the channels that, we dictate. And be able to drive them to those self-service channels and just explain that process to them during that sales interaction, and then also like after sale interaction if they have an issue. It's very important that they're able to solve those issues quickly because again, they're not here to hang out at their facility. They want to put their boxes in their storage unit and then they want to get on with their life. And so if there is an issue, we want to be able to resolve it quickly. We've made massive investments in being able to make that process seamless using AI, using machine learning, like you said, and then also using some rules-based logic as well to be able to get people their gate codes, their unlock codes, like if they need to report an issue, they can do all of that without having to speak to someone.
So fascinated by this, and when people, there are still people, I've had people on the podcast recently that are still so tied to this idea of having a manager on site at a store. And I think about myself, and I like to think I'm a pretty high performing individual, but I make so many mistakes on routine, repetitive things every day, or just completely forget to do something that I was supposed to do, that it seems so logical if we can replace that with technology where, yeah, maybe the technology breaks down and we got to go fix a bug, but it's not going to break down as much as I do. I can promise you that. So it just seems so logical to kind of fill those gaps in. Two things that have come up that I want to finish out with that I want to talk to you about. One, you brought up data before, and this is something I'm fascinated by. I still see people out there talking about it's still a great time to get into storage. It's still a great time if you're a new investor in storage to start, acquiring new assets. I kind of don't feel that anymore. I feel like if you don't have a base of data that you can make decisions off of in-house, it seems to me like it's going to be very hard to compete going forward in this industry. I'm interested to get your take on that. You just brought up that idea of all the data you guys have in house. How important is that going to be moving on 2026 and beyond to have that access to data to make new decisions?
Yeah, well, what I'll say is that when times are good, um, anyone can do well in this business, right? We saw that a few years ago when during COVID or post COVID, if you bought a property and you didn't even really have to have a website, but if you had a website, you did fine. And there really wasn't a lot of science that went into it because there was so much demand in the industry. So a lot of people got into the business. And then what we're seeing now is that, a lot of people are out there are getting revealed that maybe they did well during COVID because of COVID and kind of riding that wave, and we saw a lot of people start big organizations and things like that, and so I think what's going to separate people is yes, the people that not only have the data but have the infrastructure to be able to interpret it and to make decisions. We look at KPIs and there's a lot of vanity metrics out there and things like that, really just kind of noise. Um, you know, we look at historicals definitely, but we also look at like leading indicators because that's what's going to predict the future. A lot of people are, they wait till the end of the month, look at their P&Ls, look at their reviews, look at historical. That tells a, past story of what happened. We're focused on what is going to happen. And being able to predict that, with a certain confidence interval. And that helps with our underwriting, it helps with our acquisition process. It makes sure that we're buying assets in the right locations, that, we have realistic assumptions. A lot of, we saw some very creative underwriting that happened the last few years that,
No.
and there's, you can only you can only automate so much, and you can't ever out automate a bad acquisition. We're seeing that out there too. But I think largely the self-storage industry, it's one of the most stable asset classes out there. It's a great industry to be in. Recession resistant, I think, is the term that everyone uses, but it's really driven by a lot of life events that are going to continue to happen regardless. So, people moving, people, death, divorce, all those things that are kind of demand drivers. So it's really this very durable asset class, and it's continuing to grow. So I'm excited to be in here.
You folded an answer to my second question into that answer, which I love. I was at the investment forum in New York City on Wednesday, and it was depressing to be honest. The general consensus was not great. You guys have been able to do really well in the last couple of years. Your acquisitions are great. Obviously, your third party platform is growing very strongly. You attribute that to that ability to really kind of make those projections, right? Not just look backwards, but use that data to make a step to look forward.
Yeah, I mean, we're buying properties right now. I mean, we're raising funds, we're deploying capital, and we're buying deals. I think our last acquisition, we're buying sub $60 a square foot. Those you can't even build them for that price anymore. So,
Not even close. I can tell you,
you know,
as a developer.
yeah, and it's kind of amazing what our acquisition team, our data science team is able to go out there and find and be able to do. And I mean, they say real estate's you make money on the buy, right? So if you're not buying it right, that's what I think is what's probably that hesitation you're hearing out there is that if you don't have those tools out there to source acquisitions and you're just relying kind of on widely marketed deals and things like that. I mean, usually you're not getting much of a deal at that point. So I think with our team, what we've been able to do is capture a lot of data from the industry and be able to put in a lot of quantitative but also qualitative metrics as it relates to the industry, and we're able to take that and kind of go out and look for acquisition targets ourselves. So apart from just waiting for things to kind of come across our email or our desk of, hey, this is a great deal, come look at it. We're going out there and we're looking at like, who are the operators that are ones that we see tremendous value add in, and in the markets that we want to be in, that we see, leading indicators of that's going to be a great market to be in. Because by and large, we talk about storage globally. It's a very localized business, as you know. So there's certain market fundamentals that will drive demand in certain areas. So there's still a lot of money to be made, a lot of acquisitions to be had out there. It's just making sure that you're using the data that's available.
Can't thank you enough for the discussion about 10 Federal, going back to your public storage days. It's so insightful to have you spend some time. I got two quick questions I want to ask you before we wrap up the half hour. First one, I'm fascinated as I'm doing research to do this podcast. I want to know how Brad and Cliff Minsley get in an office together the day after a Duke UNC basketball game.
Yeah, no, it was interesting for me because when I moved up here, I had to figure out what shade of blue. Yeah,
for those that don't know, the two brothers who started 10 Federal, one went to UNC and one went to Duke. So it's kind of a fascinating little, and if you don't follow college basketball, this makes no sense to you whatsoever. But if you do follow college basketball, you know what I'm talking about. Second question, you went to UCF. I used to live in Nebraska a long time ago. Scott Frost back at UCF. Good thing, bad thing? What do you think?
I'm not close enough to opine on that, but we were national champions that one year.
Scott Frost did it. Then he went to Nebraska and didn't do very well. So now he's back at UCF. All right. Better football school while you were there, LSU or UCF?
Well, LSU.
All right.
But I still partial to UCF. So I go Knights. Go
Undergrad,
Tigers.
you got to kind of stick with the undergrad school, right? Unfortunately, I did my undergrad at Tufts University. I shouldn't say unfortunately, great school, but no football to speak of. So my grad school was Syracuse. I can at least cheer for a Division I football school, even if we lose all the time. Andrew Capranos, president at 10 Federal, incredible. Cannot thank you enough for all the insight and for taking the time out of your life to share a half hour with us on the podcast. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You want to get a hold of Andrew. They're doing an amazing job in the third-party management segment, really helping operators or owners be able to tighten up operations. You can reach him at tedfederalstorage.com or acapranos at 10 Federal. You saw the email down there. I am your host, Thaddeus Campbell, S3 Partners, 30-plus years, 300-plus ground-up developments. If you are a developer and have a project, you need help from entitlement through certificate of occupancy, we can help make that dream come true. Feel free to reach out. That is it for this week's episode of the Stories Behind the Door podcast. Shout out to my friends at Kiwi 2 Construction, Wayne Woolsey and his team, and a huge congratulations to them on their acquisition by Janus. Look forward to seeing everybody next week on the show.